Aloha, folks. Welcome to this edition of 5 Questions, where we talk with folks that have news and information regarding our state and beyond, and today is no exception. You can tune into KHVH Radio and also log on to hawaiireporter.com for 5 Questions. Today featuring Bob Williams. Bob, of course, is the head of State Budget Solutions, a nonprofit organization that advocates fundamental reform of state budgets. And it's a pleasure to chat with you, Bob. Aloha to you.
Great to be with you, Rick.
Bob, would you mind, please, once again, reminding us with question number 1, tell us a little bit about yourself and State Budget Solutions.
Well, I'm a former state legislator. I was a Washington state legislator for 10 years, and then I found a think tank, the Evergreen Freedom Foundation in Washington State. I was there for 20 years, and then a year ago, I started this organization called State Budget Solutions, where we're looking at all 50 states. What are the best practices? What are the worst practices? Not only in terms of state budgets, but also pension reform and collective bargaining reform.
When we do talk about state budgets, in question number 2, can you give us your assessment of the overall health of our 50 states in regard to budgeting?
Well, all 50 states are really still in a lot of fiscal trouble, and one of the problems is they took this heroin from the federal government a couple of years ago. They thought it was great taking this federal money, but as a result, they had to do maintenance of effort, and so they got in deeper. So rather than adjusting their budgets in the recession, they ended up having a lot of deficits moving forward, and in many cases they used, as Hawaii did, a lot of gimmicks to balance the budget, raid money from other funds, take money from your hurricane fund, and so now they're facing serious problems unless they fundamentally reset their budget.
What is the? This might be an obvious question. What is the outcome if there is no fundamental change?
Well, the outcome if there's no fundamental changes is that they'll raise taxes so high that people won't be able to afford it. And once you raise taxes, as they found out in Maryland, all you raise taxes too high, people move out of the state.
Question number 3, and there will be some follow-ups, I'm sure, but that has to do with the identification, Bob, of good and bad practices. Can you outline some examples of both, please?
Well, good practices would be a state like Indiana, where when Mitch Daniels came in, the governor recognized that state spending was out of control. So he actually set about to reduce state spending. So Indiana not only has reduced their workforce drastically, but they've also are spending less money than they were 2 years ago, which is very unusual. We've seen other states go out and have fundamental reform of collective bargaining, as in the case of Wisconsin, because they realized that the state employee salaries and benefits simply were unsustainable. Ohio has tried it. That will be on the ballot this fall to see whether they succeed or not. The bad practices are states like Hawaii that raid their funds to balance the budget and then have a problem the next year. And then in terms of the governor saying, well, I'm going to get some concessions for the state employees and talk about reducing their salary a little, but in terms of giving them more time off. And so now in Hawaii, if you're a state employee, you get off sick leave, vacations, and other time you get off 61 days a year, which is 3 months. There's only 5 days in a work week.
And that is the inevitable segue into your overall assessment of the state of Hawaii. And we have used everything from furloughs to delay of payment on salaries we've tried a little bit of everything just to kind of Band-Aid this budget together year after year. If this were a patient, we're dying of 1,000 cuts. Again, overall, here in Hawaii, what is it that concerns you the greatest?
Well, what concerns me the greatest is you continue to spend more than the revenue forecast. And legislators play games a lot, and they focus just on the general fund state spending, which is less than half of the total spending. And so they may, in terms, say the general fund's balanced, but the way they did that was by taking money from other funds. And so when we look at Hawaii over the last 10 years, you come in as the 47th best state. In other words, there's only 3 states worse than you in terms of spending without overspending.
So the analysis, and to come to that conclusion, is literally a dollar-for-dollar analysis, Bob, is that right?
The analysis is looking at on a per capita basis, looking at what the spending has been at total spending versus the revenue forecast, or the actual revenue.
We're almost in one of these catch-22s. Even if we wanted to reduce the amount of spending, we have mandatory expenditures that have got to be paid, and primarily to personnel, unionized employees. If we don't break that cycle, I mean, how can we expect to see anything different?
Well, again, it's best practice. You have to look at around the country, and we've seen in the case of New York, where the governor has and this is a Democrat governor, has very strongly said we can't afford this. He asked the legislature to approve a budget that would spend $2 billion more than the revenue forecast and demand that he get $2 billion in concessions from the union. And he's getting quite a few of those. He doesn't have all of them yet. One of the unions refused to give him concessions last week, and so the next day he issued the layoff notices. So you need governors who have the courage of their convictions, but they have to recognize you can't keep kicking this ball down the hill, which is what Hawaii's been doing. They keep pushing the debt off to the future, and that day of reckoning is coming.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, and I know that there are other states that are performing fairly well as well. Can you cite a couple more of these states, and what was the key to their success?
Well, Utah's done a great job, and again, the key to their success is saying, here's the revenue forecast. We're going to put 2% into reserve, and we're not going to spend more than that, and then allocate the money out and start looking at outcomes. Now, surprisingly, even California is recognizing things are pretty bad, and they just adopted a performance-based budget, which means rather than focusing on incomes, which most states do, they're going to start trying to budget based upon performance outcomes. For example, why put any more money into education, K-12 education, until you find out how they're using the money right now? Why put any more money into higher ed until you find out how they're doing? And then a dramatic shift in higher ed, which we're starting to see some examples of, is to fund the student, not the institution.
Right.
For example, I don't have the numbers in Hawaii, but in Washington State, 2 of our 4-year schools, after 6 years, less than 50% of the kids get a degree. Now imagine if you're a parent or student who has a 6-year college loan and no degree.
Right.
I guarantee you if the student were funded rather than the institution, those institutions would start being concerned about degrees.
Right. Very well put. And that, yeah, here at home we're spending, and I could take K through 12, we spend about $12,500 per student, and many parents are shaking their heads going, my goodness, that amount of expenditure, some private schools in our community don't even have that much of an expense. It's amazing.
You're right on that, and the private schools have a much higher graduation rate.
Right. We're talking with Bob Williams, enjoying our conversation. Bob, of course, with State Budget Solutions. If folks would like to learn more about you and the organization, Bob, what's the best way?
Our website is statebudgetsolutions.org, or they can contact me at 253-884-4665.
The information is tremendously helpful. That leads us to question number 5 out of our 5 questions, Bob, and that is, what federal actions decidedly affect states in their budgeting process?
Well, the states are being killed by Obamacare, and the full cost of that hasn't hit, but it's going to really hit in terms of Medicare and Medicaid. The states are being hit a lot with the federal arsenic or stimulus they took, and there's all these means of effort requirements they have to have on that. For example, even the new Obama's jobs bill, which they're promising more money to hire teachers in Hawaii, if Hawaii takes that money, the money will only last for 1 year, and then Hawaii's got to guarantee that they will use their own money to continue that same level of spending for 2 years. States can't afford that.
There's the Supreme Court is considering taking up the case of Obamacare, and based on their decision, Bob, what do you anticipate if the decision is for or opposed based on constitutionality?
Well, I think if the system, if the Supreme Court does throw out Obamacare, which I think they will because of the mandate that you have to buy a product you don't want, I mean, that seems to be clearly against the Constitution. I think that happens. We're going to see a lot of states move ahead on patient-centered health care, more health savings accounts and things like that. If the court upholds Obamacare, you're going to lose a lot of small business jobs. They simply can't afford it.
And I just shudder to think of what the associated tax burden is going to be. Just already with Hawaii near the top of the most heavily taxed individually in the country, we're almost to a breaking point here. But we have a political structure over here, Bob, as I'm sure you're well aware of, that it's not conducive to really representing the best interests of the general population. I mean, there are certain segments of our population that benefit greatly, but so for the rest of us, we're just kind of sitting there going, like, what's next?
Well, sooner or later, pendulum will swing back. I gave up a lot. I really gave up on a lot of the East Midwest states, the Pennsylvanias, Ohio's, Indiana, Michigan's, particularly Wisconsin. And when I see what's happened just in 2 years, and again, so much depends upon getting a governor with a strong backbone.
Yeah, that is so essential. Once again, we are delighted that Bob Williams joins us from State Budget Solutions, SBS. May we have the website address again, please, Bob?
StateBudgetSolutions.org.
And there you have it. Thanks so much for spending so much time with us. We do appreciate it. All
Thank
the best.
Have a great day.
All the best to you. Thank you, Bob. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.